All right, everybody. So good morning and thank you for joining us today for the security industry wrap up of 2020 and most likely probably 2021. We know that the pandemic has brought safety and security importance to the forefront of business management and planning. And during this online conversation, we'll discuss real-time implications we're seeing during the pandemic and how these might shape changes in the industry post-pandemic and moving forward. What we hope to gather today is the opportunities to add value that have become apparent during this pandemic. And how has the security's place in the C-level discussion changed? And finally, has this given fuel to challenge the status quo? So that's kind of the background of some of the conversations we're going to be having today. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce my esteemed panel. So I myself, I'm Holley Hunt. I have been passionately evangelizing innovation and change, AI, IoT in the industry for over 20 years. And I'm very excited to have been invited to moderate today's conversation by the RAD group. And I wanted to make sure we set up the conversation today to really help enable the full industry. So each of us are going to be playing a role. So we also have our next panelist that we have today, Mr. Slotnick. And Jeff, I've known him for quite some time in the industry because he's been an evangelist for enterprise security risk management. And when I started years ago, I thought, oh, what is that? And it's more and more apparent how important it is that we really implement the management program and practices in there. Jeff started as an engineer early in the industry looking for the why. He's an early adopter of technology, absolutely an industry advocate. I think he's involved in every, industry association out there actively. A thought leader, really a change agent for 21 years. And he started in the military, so he leans on that background and practice as he's grown up with his engineering background. Next, we have today with us Chief Randy Burba. And Randy's the chief of police for Chapman University. He's been in the industry for over 34 years, but what I find most interesting is he stayed and started in campus safety. And so we're really looking for the chief to give us perspective from his side of the table in the C-suite of what's changing and how he's seen the past and what that's going to look like moving forward. Next on our panel today, we have Mr. Reinharz with RAD, and we're quite excited that Steve has been an evangelist for change. I've had the pleasure and opportunity of being Steve's business partner at Cognify and have got to see what it is to work with a visionary. And one thing about Steve that's quite interesting is he actually wrote his first book on AI while he was a teenager in a summer job. So we're really excited that Steve's brought this together that we can all share. And Steve's going to be playing that role of technologist today. And then finally, we have Chuck Harold. We all know him and love him. He's host of Security Guy TV. And it's Chuck that really helps set the tone and the stage. And so today we're excited to have him really lean in and give us his information of influence. You know, Chuck, I think you've interviewed over 2,000 people.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, so quite a lot of information and support and data there. So let's go ahead and just kick it off if we'd like to. So we're going to go ahead and do a slide. There we go. I want to make sure we have just a little bit of housekeeping today. All the attendees will remain on mute and video off, and there will be a Q&A session at the end of the panel conversation to help support that. If you have any questions and you really want to make sure that we dig into them, please direct all those questions via chat you see here to Security 22 host that's here on the chat room here. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide and get things started. So here's the big question in here, and we're going to direct this to Mr. Slotnick. Jeff, really paint the picture. You talk to so many broad type of enterprise risk management programs. Can you really tell us and give us a perspective from your seat what you think the security jobs will look like going forward in the industry?
Well, interestingly enough, if the pandemic has been successful in one thing, it has been the facilitation of digital transformation. And in digital transformation, we're learning to do things just like what we're doing today, where this would be an in-person conference somewhere or a session at a conference. It is a virtual online event, and we're seeing a lot of transition of traditional security jobs moving into the virtual environment. People working from home as opposed to being in brick and mortar office. This is having a lot of impact, especially on things like security operation centers and whatnot that are still partially staffed but may not be fully staffed. So a lot of opportunities for doing things without a brick and mortar structure are really changing this industry. I know in my business, we've had two major projects that we've accomplished virtually that we would have done on-site in person in the past that we're now doing in a virtual environment. For the guarding industry, buildings are vacant, need to be protected. I know here in the Seattle area, with the civil unrest we have, almost every security guarding company has been tasked out to the max, especially in locations where police services may not be available or police services may be unlimited. Security services seem to be picking up.
Jeff, you'd mentioned when we visited prior to this that if someone was to call their guarding company provider and say, hey, this guy's sick, it's not working, we have a COVID incident, and we now have to evacuate 8 bodies, you had shared that there's really not any more bodies. There's really not any more officers to roll out. There's just more posts that you'll kind of glean that support from.
You're precise. You're precise in that. I mean, even before this event, hiring into the security guarding industry has been difficult. It's been tough to find qualified people that stay around for an extended period of time. So that profession has always seen high rates of turnover and has had difficulty with recruitment. In some cases, only able to recruit 75 to 85% of needed staffing for a contract. So what that results in is overworked people and lots of overtime.
So with your customers and some of the partners that you're leaning in with this problem, how are they mitigating that risk? What are they doing for their gaps?
Well, they're looking at more efficient ways of doing business. They are looking more towards technology to facilitate things. I mean, a perfect example is what we're here discussing today. Where Romeo, if you had 2 or 3 mobile robots that are performing a function that's an observe and report function, and it's managed by one person, managing 3 or 4 different devices, similar to a global security operations center operation, where you have one operator monitoring multiple systems to replace people in the field. So that's technology is being used to supplement people power.
Yep, I can absolutely see that. And I think that's probably going to be one of our greatest risks going into 2022 is having the right type of people. I believe, Chuck, you had shared with me a statistic this week that said that there's, or maybe it was you, Jeff, I can't recall, but there are so many IT jobs opened. I believe 1.5 to 2 million IT related roles open. And we definitely know that there's a convergence in that talent in this space. How do we think we're going to develop for that? And just in the interest of time, I want to jump to Randy and talk about what we look at jobs in the future, how you're staffing today, and what some of the things you're doing maybe a little bit differently to mentor, develop, or bring forward new talent.
Yeah, so it is a challenge. Definitely, Jeff is 100% correct, and it's only going to get worse. And one of the good news pieces out of all of this is that I think the future is that we're going to have to leverage some of those, available resources with technology, right? So they're force multipliers, right? If we can't get 100 people to staff something, maybe we can do it with 20 people and some use of some of the up and coming technology. But one of the things that we're doing to really kind of help develop people is, some of it sounds old school, but some of it still works, right? So we do some programming with our students, maybe hoping to get some of them to want to go into this field in the future. We'll do things like ride-alongs. We'll host, we have some clubs and organizations that are actually geared around this business. We have an EMT and medical aid club that we actually fund and help. They perform a lot of the medical things at some of our football games and different events. So it's a way for them to learn and get their foot in the door to the industry, so to speak. We do some CCERT training. We partner with our faculty and do some RAD, which is rape, aggression, defense, training, not robot assisted devices. So there's another RAD out there, but so a lot of that, just to get them to see, once you get people involved personally of how to do something or engage in something, it naturally leads to questions and questioning. And hey, this is kind of neat. How did you get into this? And so it's more of that mentor role. So we try to do that in a lot of different facets in order to bring and develop people that want to get into this industry and figure out ways to protect people and get smarter people of the future. I think the largest challenge is that's always been kind of raising people that want to do the baseline security stuff. But to everybody's point, and I think we'll hear more about it on this call, technology is really the future. And so it's more about getting people that are Renaissance people that can understand the grassroots parts of security, but also can be adept and speak that technology language and keep the future moving forward. Otherwise, we're just going to get left in the past.
Would you say that moving forward, if you wanted to be in this industry, whether you grew up in law enforcement or a military background, or you just like technology, you're going to have to be a technologist? And I'm going to throw that one over to Steve and looking at jobs in this market. Maybe Randy, you can kind of, Chief, put something in there too, the two of you. But first, Randy, and then Steve, I'd like for you to maybe chime in.
100%. I think one of the things I shared with a colleague the other day, another chief from another campus, is that we have to start thinking about, reducing our forces, or not really even reducing, but changing the way we staff our forces. And that is, we're going to have to hire people with different backgrounds and different expertises in order to share and have a convergence for the future. So, we can't just have security personnel on staff. We have to have IT personnel that actually understand the technology, and more so than understand it, but can help integrate it and help the lay person, if you will, or the regular security guy understand it, so they can become create that symbiotic relationship that can get us on a trajectory where all cylinders are firing. Otherwise, it's just people, if it doesn't come together, we're going off in two different directions, lost.
Yep, I can see that. And so, Steve, can you talk to us about how we bridge that gap of technology and people together so that it's symbiotic and comfortable and pleasant and makes everyone's world better?
So many good elements in that question, Holly. Let's start with a quick fun fact. RAD is sitting around 35 employees, of which 2 were previously security guards that elevated themselves into the tech space and have joined RAD. Now, that whole process of, hey, RAD is in the business of replacing dull, mundane, expensive, stand-at post jobs with technology, right? We have to do this. This will get done. Everybody on this call is in clear understanding that in 2022, RAD devices and RAD type devices will be much more ubiquitous than they are today. And then the question comes, well, hey, you've got 1.1 million security officers and you have 2 million people in America devoted to some type of security function or law enforcement. Where do those guys go? Well, the first piece is we're going to hire a bunch of them for sure, right? And the other piece of it is as we reestablish, say, the budgets of organizations like Randy's, right, where he's got a certain budget. Now we're reducing some of the expensive HPW. We're bringing in some robots per W. My request is always, and it has been followed twice by 2 customers, is make careers for the guys that are left. Make these careers.
I love that. Make careers for the guys that are left.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big statement. And I'm not sure who it was that we were talking to. Maybe it was Jeff or Randy this week, but we talked about how if we really want to talk about diversity and inclusion in the industry, the guarding industry is absolutely a prime place for us to dig in and elevate the workforce and enable their success. And I think that helping them to drive in that technology space, we can really get there.
Yeah. Holley, you and I were on the younger side of the old guard of our industry, okay?
Thank
You're
you.
obviously on the much
Thank you.
younger side. You're on the much, much, much younger side,
Thank you.
Holley. Yes, yes. But the guard is changing. We've now had multiple sales presentations to buyers that are under 30. And those buyers in the security space, they just immediately get it. They pick it up, they get it, they understand exactly what we're saying in the first couple of minutes, and they want it. I think that trend and catering to that trend as an industry is going to be one of the many pieces that allow us to hit this tipping point. The tipping point, of course, is where every guarding company gets a proposal that has a piece of specific technology included in that HPW proposal, because I have simply not seen a post that could not have been supplemented by a RAD device. It's just as obvious as the day is long.
There's a lot of innovation and technology that I think the mundane and dangerous you've said in the past that we could replace, and help in that space. I'm going to come up here to Chuck. I love the Hollywood squares here. And I want Chuck to lean in on this because you've had a lot of conversations in this space and gleaming through some of those impactful points. What do you think is going to have to happen that we haven't been doing to help elevate our industry in the change of employment and getting the right talent?
Oh boy, a lot of stuff to say. So here's the first guard robot right here. Remember this? The first technology. And when the wand, remember the electronic wand came out?
Yes.
Says, oh, we can't have an electronic wand. Those are evil. Those are going to cause problems. We can't replace this. We migrated. We did that, right? Here's the issue I see when I speak to people in the guard industry. They're happy about COVID for this reason. They think it's going to create more jobs. Why? Because they're going to put a guard in a lobby, screening my forehead, checking my temperature, whatever you're going to do to see if I possibly may be infecting people, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to tie that as the absolute worst security decision in security history. And I'm going to tie it with the Trojan horse and the guys that let the Trojan horse into Troy. It's the worst thing we could possibly do is put a guard screening people for COVID, right? You're talking about lawsuits involving touching people, harassment, sexual harassment. The guard's going to say, wait a minute, I caught COVID from the person I was screening. It's the worst idea ever. So we need to bring automation into this. Is there a shortage? There's a shortage now. There's a shortage when I was in the business. 2021, Jeff, you're right on. There's going to be a shortage. We got to innovate that. But let me talk about 2022. You're talking about a severe shortage. You're not talking about the average shortage of guard business that has a 300% turnover a year for a big box company. You're talking about a society that is basically divided like this. And by the way, the world's always been divided like this. There's people that say live and let live. And then there's people that say live and let live the way I say so. Okay? So you're going to get 50% of the people say, I got no problem being in the guard business. I'm not afraid of catching COVID. The other 50% of the guard force business, the guards are going to say, listen, I could go flip burgers at McDonald's or be a barista, which is a great title at Starbucks. Why do I want to be in the guard business? There is a portion we're not analyzing properly, not the regular guard service attrition, people that are going to leave the industry, and they are leaving the industry. And the big box companies are saying, that's okay. We're going to entice them with new jobs that pay more money. I don't think it's going to happen. I think 22 is going to be a disaster for staffing models for the physical guard industry. And the only logical thing is you got to move to technology and innovation. That's it. It's the only way you're going to solve it.
Chuck, along those lines, as RAD works to sign up, dealers, right, guarding companies, and we've successfully captured, 3 of the 5 largest guarding companies in the world. A little pitch out there for us, so that's good news. In all of those C-level discussions, everybody is clear as day saying that they want to reduce their manpower. the guarding companies themselves are desperate to reduce their manpower for those reasons that you said. So I agree with you. I think that the client dealer relationship, the relationship, say, between Randy and any third-party guards that he might use, that relationship is fundamentally flawed. When Randy's expecting SEAL Team 6, but the budget is for 25 cents over 7-Eleven wages, you have this impossible disparity to fix.
Well, yeah, they're trying to reduce the guard force because they know the guard force is self-reducing, right? So it's self-serving to a degree. And I don't think it's a bad idea. I think they're on the right track that way. I think the industry is going to be a little surprised by the lack of technically skilled people to help augment this. And shame on the physical guard business, who for the last 50 years has had people sit in a lobby with, check sheets and pencils and paper, and just recently went to automation. We should have been training the million guards to transition into cybersecurity, because Holley, to your point earlier, we have a severe shortage of about 1.5 to 2 million people in cybersecurity. So are guards going to move to cybersecurity positions, which pay twice as much and have benefits, and then we'll have zero guards? This really has to be analyzed, I think, day of and in real time, because it's going to flip that quickly in 2022.
I would agree. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question, but there's a lot in there that we can dig into at another point, and I'm sure a lot of input there. So thanks for wrapping that up, Chuck. So the next question that we had is, what opportunities to add value has your team been leveraged for during the pandemic? And can you continue to deliver those opportunities once we've moved through and we get back to a new norm? And I'm going to start off with Jeff again. He's usually the tip of the sword when people are looking for transformation. So can you talk about what some of the things that people are doing? And then also, do you see this continuing into 2022?
Well, again, we talked about technology, and let me just tell my own story and what we're doing, because I think it's very important. We're a consultancy, and our success is driven by, the consulting hours that we're able to bill to clients. In third and fourth quarter, I had clients that came up to me and said, Jeff, we've had projects budgeted for you, but we've not been able to complete them due to COVID. Is there any way that you can complete our project virtually? Which really caused me to have to take a step back and develop a plan and think about, well, if I can't go to the client site, how am I going to do this project virtually? And as a result of that, I've done 3 projects now that I traditionally would have included a very significant site visit. The first one is a review of a global security operations center. We're doing it predominantly on Microsoft Teams. So we're, it's in-person chats, having an advocate single point of contact on site. That's my eyes and ears. We did a guard force efficiency review for a company that has a $20 million a year guard spend, and help them. And believe it or not, through technology and some different business operating models, we were able to identify savings of about $4.5 million a year for that client. And the third project, which is kicking off next week, is my first virtual risk, threat, and vulnerability assessment. Now, this is a process that's generally a very hands-on process. Yeah. And so what we did is we located somebody within the company that's going to act as my eyes and ears on site. All the other data is going to be fed in, and we're going to join a conference call. And with his iPad and my computer, I'm going to virtually walk through on an assessment with this person. They're going to take the photographs and video that I need taken. So, very different operating models from where we were even 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just going to continue to develop, is virtual tools to facilitate traditional work. And of course, there's a cost savings in that. The cost savings is I don't have a lot of travel. So that cuts almost 20% of my operating budget and what I need to charge a client to do the same thing. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are going on, and as I said on the onset, Holley, that COVID has accelerated digital transformation because we're being caused to look at different ways to do business. You know, things that we might have said, oh yeah, that's nice, I'll think about it. Well, today it's become the new normal and the operating necessity, and that operating necessity is forcing digital transformation.
So I want to ask this question, this what made digital transformation stall out, and a lot of things I did, is all the stakeholders weren't at the table, and the ones that needed to be there were usually the naysayers because they weren't comfortable with it. But due to convenience, those folks are first at the table now saying, I want it. How is that true? Have you seen that, Chief, in some of the things you've needed to do before? And we know in higher ed, they could get a little bit difficult with new tech and protection and IP and things like that. Can you talk about how you've been able to get some things done that you haven't been able to get done before?
Yeah, no, thank you, Holly. That's absolutely a true statement. You know, we're always going to the table at budget time saying, I'd like this new technology, I'd like to add this, or I'd like to add that. And it's always trying to prove the ROI, or, you know, we just can't afford that right now. You have such an intense budget already, those types of things. And yeah, when the COVID pandemic hit and everything kind of happened, we as leaders came together in the university, and then all of a sudden it was, people were thinking, how can we do these temperature checks, to Chuck's point, right? We don't want somebody standing there doing that. So how can we do that? That doesn't make a lot of sense. It puts people at risk. And so then we looked at some FLIR cameras and some things to do that, you know, automatically. And all of a sudden everybody was on board looking for different technological ways to achieve that and keep everybody else safe. And then other areas too, is just even additional cameras, or, you know, being able to unlock doors remotely, you know, having all of that go online, because we'd had some online, most of our exterior doors, but all the interiors were standalone, even though they were card. So there was conversations around how we could do all of that remotely, right? And so I think it really helps bring to the forefront what we're talking about, that the future is in this technology, and it's only going to grow, and we're only going to add. And the pandemic has really helped kind of shake that out and show that we have to look at that for the future.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about that and ask Steve a question, because we're talking about the opportunities to add value. We've been really kind of the orphan child in the security world when it comes to budget dollars and tech refreshes. And we're seeing tech refreshes in the 7, 8, 9-year marks, when we see in, you know, B2B, other places, tech refresh 12, 18 months and life cycles like that. So how are we going to be able to get those other stakeholders to invest in this tech refresh? All these sensors are going to help the whole enterprise, right? How have you helped folks in these tech refreshes? Because I think that's one thing that is happening, that we're going to continue to see, that this has really put ignited opportunity, I think.
Yeah, Holley, great question, a great follow-up question to the original one, which I want to address, which is, you know, how have those C-level meetings changed since the pandemic began, and what opportunity does that leave for the security group? Well, you know, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I expressed on this call was kind of like to gently put the security industry on notice, and to say, hey guys and ladies, this is no longer an industry where doing what you did last year is satisfactory anymore. And, you know, security industry has been very good at getting more HVW and getting more cameras, right? This is what we've done, all of us collectively, over the past 50 years or so. That's not good enough anymore. I'm seeing major clients challenged by their purchasing departments to find savings. And I'm seeing this disconnect inside large companies, where you've got your guarding group, you've got your finance group, and finance is saying to guarding, save some money. And guarding's like, I don't know how to, or it's not really my skill set, right? What I'm saying right now is these folks in guarding need to get up to speed on the technology that they must implement in order to satisfy what their organization's needs are. And that's why we're shooting this as really, you know, growing technology. I see Jeff. I know Jeff's got some great stuff on this. So let me flip it over to him.
Yeah, hey, Jeff.
I think one of the answers to that, Steve, and what we have to get acceptance of, is a technology scorecard. There's lots of different technologies out there that do a lot of different things. And what we have to look at is a technology scorecard so that we can evaluate these technologies like yours and others, and are they the best fit for our organization? Because if people don't know how to, we have to get people that don't even know how to ask the question smart.
Right.
The best way to get them smart is by providing a scorecard.
Yep.
And
That's a great tool.
And I think that's one of the things that we've been very successful in, is defining the key performance indicators and measures that define the scorecard for people when they're selecting technology.
And Jeff, we've been working on that with you for some time now with Mark Fulmer. And just for the rest of the panel and the rest of the audience, what essentially Jeff and one of the RAD members have been working on is saying, hey, if I do nothing, then this is the series of risk factors that I have at this particular location. If I put in an officer, this is how that affects those risk factors. If I put in a camera, if I put in access control, if I put in a RAD device, this is that scorecard, so that we can be, very aware, like you said, educating the buyers and educating the users as to what risks will still remain, what do those risks look like, and how are we going to prepare and defend against them.
Awesome. Randy, I saw you raise your hand and you're on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment to piggyback on that, because it's all spot on. It's 100%. And I think the other thing that people that are selling technology, people that are moving this industry in the future, one thing they need to keep in mind for the end user is sometimes there's still a fear of technology, not just because it's innate, but because they may have had a bad experience. I was sharing with Holley on a call earlier this week. I bought a piece of technology from a person, and 3 months later it was obsolete, and they were turning around trying to sell me the next thing. I'm like, well, you should be helping me, not have to do that. Help me, future-proof whatever it is you're trying to sell me initially, because that's just a very bad model that left a very bad taste in my mouth, right? And that person still tries to contact me and sell me things. I'm like, you sold me something that's obsolete in 3 months. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to continue to do business with you. And so that makes some people leery of technology, because they see it. Apple comes out with a new computer every 3 months. It's like, how am I going to get ROI? And I make this big investment, and then I have to make it over and over and over again. So I think that's a big issue that the industry needs to look at when they're
Randy,
producing.
I think one of the things in that issues too with the tech refresh that we began to see is having more open platforms. Traditionally in the security industry, it's all been closed. And we did it for a purpose, because we didn't have the ways to lock it down and protect it and save it. And moving forward, I think we all need to talk about more open architecture to be able to help guys like you make smart investments over the long haul. I wanted to just throw this back up over to Chuck, because we talked quite a bit about the opportunities to add value during the pandemic and things people can do and conversations you've had. Can you share a little bit on that? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Technology failed. All right. So we've heard a lot of talk about ESRM, emergency enterprise security risk management, return on investment. These are things to get people interested, get the C-suite to join. Let's face it, the security business comes down to money. If I can afford it, if I'm mandated by the insurance company, if my employees want it, I'm going to put guards into a location. Now we have a guard shortage. We have to transfer to technology. How do we do that? I'm going to, I think, coin a new phrase for you here, Holley. We don't need to focus on return on investment. To Randy's point, we need to focus on an emotional return on investment. And I guarantee you in 2022, when you walk into a boardroom, if you're not bringing the emotional quota to this that makes people feel good about what you're doing, you're out. That's going to be more important than the financial return on investment, because that's driven by what I talked about earlier. Live and let live, or let me tell you how to live and let live. It's the separation of philosophies in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So this emotional part is really, really important for us to get right and understand that this technology has to be tied to an emotional solution and the financial investment. And I think it'll be easier, but if we don't go there, you're going to fall on deaf ears, period.
Got it.
And Charlie, what you're talking about is making the business case for what you do. And, you know, a lot of times there is inherent waste in the way we're doing business today. And being able to calculate what that waste is, because we have outdated technology, because we don't have the ability to react to our current risks, because we don't understand the total cost of ownership, including patching, maintaining old technology, maintenance upgrades and whatnot. You know, all that plays a part into what we look at when we're doing this technology refresh.
Well, but
Because
I get it. I totally agree with you. And that's really more on the financial side. And what you're going to have to add to this is if saving money and making people feel good at the same time are not tied together, I'm not going to buy it. I don't care how much money you save me. So if people don't feel comfortable and emotionally with the technology, it's not going to flip over. Because obviously for a financial reason, it absolutely makes no sense not to use technology to save you a whole bunch of money. That's logical to anybody looking at it.
That's a really great. Oh, Jeff, did you want one more tidbit to throw in there?
No, Charlie and I agree. The back end of this for me is, you know, where you see the return in increased customer satisfaction, the ability to do your mission better, the ability to support enterprise risk and prevent it from occurring. That's how you create that happy place. So,
well, you have to measure it, right, Jeff? Like you said,
absolutely.
you have to be able to measure it is one of the key things. And I love this conversation, Chuck, and we can take this for another breakout on the EQ and the C-suite, because that's a whole nother space and play, you know, the emotional quotient part of it. In the interest of time, I'm going to pause that and put a pin in it around technology and innovation. And I'm going to go to the next question that we have here today. And we have our third question. And going forward, and it's kind of leaning in there too, is what is the role of security and safety teams and what I love calling sweet conversations. I stole that from Ray Osborne, so I have to give him props for that, you know, but it's, you know, what we talk about in the C-suite. Jeff, you've seen this, and you're an evangelist for it, of making sure security and safety has a seat at the table. It's a whole part of, you know, why we met years ago. So going forward, has happened that we're going to keep that seat now at that table?
Well, I think what has happened and what needs to continue to happen is the incorporation of enterprise security risk management as a philosophy into the industry. And what does that mean? I mean, a lot of folks have heard the word, but they don't necessarily understand what it means. When you can align the security practice of an organization, of an enterprise, with the overall strategy and risk strategy of that enterprise, then you are a business enabler. You're not just doing security for security's sake. You're an enabler of the business function. And that's how you show value for what you do. You know, let me give you an example. Most publicly traded companies have a Form 10Q, and they state their risk right on the Form 10Q. What I have seen in a lot of places is folks are uninformed even of what their corporate risk is. So when we can align the risk, mission, and strategy of the security department with the people that own the risk, which is the C-suite, all right, then we become business enablers, and we're in the C-suite assisting with making recommendations for risk-based decisions.
With that being said, in that point, I wanted to ask Randy, in his career, when did you get introduced to this model? And in your career, when did you get to have a seat at the table?
So I've been fortunate to work for really two, you know, very top tier universities that have excellent management and do excellent risk analysis, and been fortunate to have a seat at the table kind of in both places that I've been, but, you know, obviously most recently here at Chapman. Since I arrived here 15 years ago, I report directly to the EVP COO. So I pretty much have a seat at the table with major decision making and looking at business practices and kind of looking at how we can be integrated and to Jeff's point, you know, look at the holistic and risk profile of the institution and look at things through that lens. And so I've been very fortunate, and I do have a lot of colleagues that don't have that same, you know, aren't in
Right.
that same. So I definitely understand how lucky I am. But I think it's also even been enhanced a little bit by the pandemic, and to some people's points, again, because we're having those conversations and people have that fear factor, and that we can talk about how we can mitigate that fear through technology. And again, it's why I keep saying, that whether it's robots or artificial intelligence, or the wave of the future is kind of doing that, augmenting your force, or that force multiplier, to be able to answer some of these questions or some of these concerns. And I think the best way to do that is to have a seat at the table, and that's clear. And
Right.
how do you do that, right?
And
it's obviously.
I'm sorry, Randy. I wanted to point out one of the ways that when we're talking about that, I'm like, oh, wow, that's how this guy's so smart. He knows it all. Is you really invested this as a passion. It's not just a job for you, but you spend a lot of time in association work like IACLIA and ASIS and those things to make sure that you are bringing back the most valuable, impactful information to your organization.
Absolutely. To Chuck's point, I think he made a point about, security is driven by if the insurance mandates it, or if there's some sort of mandate. So a lot of these professional associations, what they do is a lot of good work in trying to get legislation or make things that might be mandated around safety. And so I've been fortunate in my career a couple of times to help get legislation pushed through in California to keep our colleges safer. One around, weapons on campus, and one around tools for investigators to solve sexual assault crimes. So,
You're being
I think
quite humble, Randy. That's a great accomplishment to be able to drive that kind of change. And that's what I think is so important on this conversation, is to see the change agents here to really make that happen in 2022 moving forward. So in that vein that we're talking about, Steve, I know that you had some things you wanted to add in here. What would you like to contribute to?
Yeah, thanks so much. We're talking about technology, right? The call is about, hey, we're all going to be using more technology, right? We've got all these reasons why, and we've established some of those reasons. One of the things I don't think that we really did so far on the call is talk about that new technology and why it's different than previous technologies.
And that's the next question. So it's fabulous. You're taking us on to the next one.
Wow.
So then what's your take on where the security industry will be in 2022 and beyond?
I tell you, what a segue, eh?
I know.
What a segue. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're moving into this new era with this new industry that we call autonomous remote services. And Holley, I know that you read our manifesto, and certainly encourage everybody else to read it. Over 1,200 distinct downloads of this paper, which in and of itself is quite an achievement, right? So we all know it's coming. And what does that mean, autonomous remote services? It means that if we're going to usefully supplement or replace or augment human workers, and if we're going to do the same thing for traditional access control and cameras, can't do the same thing. So I'm just going to take the RAD devices, of course, because, obvious connection, right? What we want these devices to do is we want them to have an autonomous response. We want them to have an intelligent, autonomous, artificially intelligent response at the edge. We want them to perform as much work as we can before bringing it back remotely to a human. That's where the autonomous and the remote words come from out of this meeting. And that hopefully gives folks like Randy the tools he needs. Hey, listen, you know what? I hate sending an officer down to clear out those kids from behind the thing, or we're having some GTAs out of this one lot on the far side of the campus. What can I do? I need someone out there to go help it. Great. We're going to autonomously, remotely satisfy that need. But the last piece of it, which I think is incredibly exciting for everybody in security, is that we're calling the last word of the industry services instead of security. Autonomous remote services. Mm-hmm. And I named it that because if you're in security, we all know that we do a lot more than security. We're giving directions. We're helping people in so many additional ways. So as we bring in these new types of technology, I want to do more than just look for bad guys and scare them away. I want to do services. I want to give directions. I want to do visitor management. I want to, do new stuff, which isn't even on the roadmap that anybody knows about yet. So this is new technology that turns on in 30 minutes. No more big construction projects anymore. It just has to be easier. I think Chuck had
And
talked
I think
about.
that assures tech refresh, Steve, too. When we talk about services, it mitigates that risk where we're not seeing tech refresh enough.
Well, that's the other part of it. I mean, over the past 2 years, we've been automatically updating all of our devices over the air with the latest analytics and the latest features. And, we don't orphan. I mean, the story that we just heard of 3 months later, the device being obsolete. I mean, that's a nightmare. That's horrible, right? It should never be like that. You
Hey,
should have
courage to the
years.
guy who came back and asked for the next sale.
Hey, that guy's got some cojones for
Yeah.
sure,
Yes, yes.
So, yeah,
Well,
no, so it's the new technology that's enabling this. And certainly we can talk about it, but back to you, Holley, sorry.
Well, I just want to put it out there. I know that we might have some questions and we have just a few minutes, to go there. And if not, then I'm going to pose our final question, which can kind of lead to that. So is there any questions? Can we open it up to the group? Is there anything that anyone has out there? Let me see if there's a new message. So I have from a question here, how do we compete with cyber risks and other function to play a significant role in the overall risk strategy? I'm going to point that to Jeff.
So physical security devices operate on a cyber backbone. These are no longer independent. We talked about convergence 10 years ago. We are converged now. Cyber risk is physical risk. And physical risk, we address this from two areas. One is the hard hack into the system. The other is the physical security of the logical system. How are we protecting our data? How are we protecting our data centers? What protections do we have in place for people bringing personal devices into the workplace, bringing that thumb drive from home and inserting it, not responding to a phishing email or social engineering? Cyber risk is physical risk, and physical risk is cyber risk. So that's where we play in that area. What we have to understand is what is our role and how we contribute to that conversation with the cyber and IT professionals. And I think a place to start is understanding their language, understanding how they talk, and being able to be supportive of them in the accomplishment of their task. At the end of the day, it's all risk, whether it's cyber, physical, or environmental health and safety. And we need to learn where we play in each of those areas.
Thanks for that. And, I kind of wanted to throw that question over to Chuck in the sense, because we talked a lot about this, Chuck, in the sense that we're going to be quite challenged with people as the perimeter. And that's going to be one of the biggest risks that we have with people being dispersed away from campus locations, office buildings, et cetera, and they become the new perimeter of the organization.
Well, Jeff's right on. There is no such thing as physical or cybersecurity. There's just security.
Yep.
There's nothing in physical security that's not the Internet of Things, right? Every device at a trade show is on the Internet. What's happened in 2020 is we immediately shifted from servers and proprietary security devices on your servers to endpoints. And endpoints are those devices on the internet that's on the peripheral, and everybody that's on Zoom is an endpoint. Everybody that's working remotely is an endpoint. Mm-hmm. We didn't build security for that. In fact, the first line of code in almost all security code is not security code. It's the last thing they put in security code. So for 2022, I think we can expect a lot more breaches in these new models we have where people are working from home, people working remotely. It all sounds great. That sounds, let's hold hands, roast marshmallows, the new world, but we haven't built the security for that. And people are working on that, but it's an afterthought, right? So I think what we're going to see are people building these new models. Security coding has not caught up to it. We're going to have more breaches. It's going to be more problematic. And that is going to come right back to ESRM. How are you going to persuade the C-suite, if there's a potential breach, that this is good technology? And that's the challenge. And I think the people that know this business are there. Their first line of code was security and they get it. But for other things, they're going to fail. And you're going to see the person at the end, the company at the end that's going to rise to the top is the person that put their security coding into these devices first.
I love that. And I know that for a lot of companies that we all work with, they're starting to really break down to the hardware fundamental level of that type of code in the little black box. So the industry as a whole needs to make sure they're hardening the edge itself. So question for Randy. Chief, as the voice of campus safety and security, what is your community expecting from security? They obviously expect to feel and be safe. How do you balance optimizing efficiency and the service delivery?
You know, to Chuck's point earlier, yeah, it's not really about selling security. It's about feeling good. You know, it's more important that people feel safe. Sometimes than even if they actually are safe. Of course, my philosophy has been if you actually make them safe, and then you have good marketing, they should feel safe, right? So really it goes back to the old, you know, community-oriented policing kind of days where you have to get to know your community and you have to be a part of it, not an appendage to it. That's the bottom line, right? You have to, and you can do that with technology, and technology can actually help with that, right? So I think it's a balance of both the old school and the new school to really get to that point. And for us, I think the other point is you hear all the defund the police, and what's happening in society reflects in security. And I think security needs to take a look at that and say, you know, they're talking about defunding the police. I'm glad I'm not the police. Well, it's coming to your door too, even just in security. You're still going to have, if you're not being socially responsible and looking at the people you serve and the reactions that security or technology cause those people to have, if you're not getting out in front of that, you're going to be having the same conversations and problems yourself.
And, you know, I think your campus is probably a pretty great example of that. You were sharing earlier that you guys are community policing. You're not sworn law enforcement. And so it takes even, like you said, a bigger marketing message in that sense. You're on mute, Randy.
Yeah, I was telling somebody I was on a call.
Oh, got that. Hey, Chief, we need you. Thank you for sticking with us. So we just need a couple more minutes. We have a couple last questions to everyone. For Steve, how do security practitioners support and adopt new tech?
Yeah, great question, right? We're at the beginning of this technology adoption curve, and the first users are actually called innovators, if you want to get technically. These are the folks that are before the early adopters. So our job is to find these innovators. My job is to work with folks like Chuck to be an antagonist in the industry, to encourage people to take chances. We have to, you know, kind of crack a couple eggs. Let's get out there. Let's use this. Let's learn about it. Because it does work, because there are dozens of clients out there that are reaping the benefits today. And that's why I'm challenging the security industry by saying that, hey, in 2022, you're going to be required to do more than just present the same budgets to senior management. You know, there's a requirement now to add the creativity with the additional performance and cost savings. It's just how it's going to be.
We have 6 minutes, and there's a really great question, and we have a time capsule question that we want to do. So I'm going to ask this audience question just because I want to put it out there. Even if we can't dig in deep, people can chew on it. One attending is commenting that the research is lacking. Solution providers want to sell their product and want my business problems to fit the solution. How is the research changing to be flexible for the future?
Well, I'll hit a bit of that. I think that might be just a small view of the whole industry. There's certainly a lot of material out there that is, you know, general and available to other pieces. I mean, the experience from that person as they ask that question could be, you know, straight from a vendor where they're trying to jam this one solution down that client's throat. And we've certainly seen that happen in our industry quite a lot.
In the past, and closed, Steve, and I think that's part of it is we had to fit our closed system or solution into that hole, right?
We did, yeah. I think that these next 12 months we're going to have, you know, our longtime practitioners such as the chief and, you know, all the other chiefs around town, you know, they're going to be getting into this. They're going to put up a couple roses. They're going to use Wally for this and that. They're going to use these different types of devices. And then generally kind of like, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats, you know, that's how we're going to get to that next level. But falling off of that tide will be the folks who don't do it, who refuse to do it, who refuse to adapt and grow. And that's just evolution.
Yep. Okay. So real fast, I have 4 minutes. And we definitely will carry the conversation after we hang up here. We'll send out something to everyone that attended with the information and some additional questions that you can have. We'll make sure that we send them to the right panelists. But if we were to put a time capsule together for 2022 and moving forward, what would we put in the time capsule that we're going to basically retire in the industry? Mementos, relics. And we'll start with Jeff. Jeff, we're not putting you in the time capsule.
No, definitely not me. But if we had to put anything in a time capsule, it would be systems that are not capable of having open network opportunities and the ability to only have siloed integration. We need to get past that. We need to be a plug and play industry. We are losing so much in the area of machine learning and artificial intelligence that can really support our industry by staying in these siloed integration systems. So I would take one of today's integration platforms and I would shove that right in the time capsule, and you know where I'd put the time capsule too. So
in a dark
ground, deep in the ground.
In a dark spot. Randy, we talked about this yesterday. What would you put in that time capsule?
Oh my goodness. Things like DTEX clocks, things like like visitor badges, just think of all the things that we manually do amazingly that we still manually do, where some of the technology replaced that manual processes have been around for 10 years already, 15 years. And we're still, this whole industry is kicking and screaming to go into the technology phase. So a lot of little trinkets like that would be great to put in the time capsule.
Awesome. Steve, what are you going to throw in the time capsule?
I'd put in any system that takes longer than 30 minutes to train your operator on.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Easy.
I mean, every time I hear customers say, "Oh, I got to send one of my techs out to XYZ for a week's worth of training," I'm like, "What? You're opening and closing doors. We do not need a week's worth of training for this, folks. Yes. 30 minutes in and out. And any system that takes more than that, that's a dinosaur."
Well, I'm sure that people will appreciate the evolution towards that. And Chuck, we're going to close out with you today. We have a minute, and I'm sorry to use, but I know you'll make it use of time.
Here we go. So I'm going to put this in the time capsule right here. All right. My future vendor.
Vendor.
Because, now hold on, don't laugh yet. Wait till the joke's over. But it's not a joke, because Bender is going to be seen as a toy in the past and standard in the future. No longer be viewed as a toy, because robots are going to come in. Now, here's something else. We're going to put this in the time capsule. Chief Wiggum, because we don't know what police are going to look like. We really don't. It's not going to look like this. Chief Wiggum's role is going to change and merge. You may say private police forces, more of those, because people don't want to fund them publicly, but you can fund them privately. So that's another thing. The third one that's going to the time capsule is this guy right here, right? Ken Brockman, the journalist. We're going to find out that the journalists of today were actually robots. Now, okay? I'm telling you, it's done. And severe personnel shortage. That's what we're gonna have a quick, not for the time capsule, but just everybody knows all those deferred mortgages and rents that were deferred for about a year. They're all going to come due in 2021, and we're going to have a severe influx of homeless people, and that's going to add to all this mess.
Absolutely. Well, we have definitely a lot to look forward to, and we identified that from this panel, we have a couple breakouts that we're going to do. So everyone that's here, please look forward to them. Jeff has offered to do an ESRM workshop to help us to make sure that we have that right stripe of strategic planning. And in the near future, Steve's going to do a workshop regarding transitioning to autonomous remote services. And I'd like to challenge that we do another one on building your EQ in the SOC, because that might be something that Chuck can also help drive.
It's another great topic, Holley.
Yeah,
very,
absolutely.
Very good. Yep.
Well, again, we appreciate everyone investing their time. We know we're all zoomed out today, but we hope that we enlightened it a little bit, and we look forward to supporting you all in the near future.
Thanks to everybody. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Thanks everybody. Good to see you.
Great.